Welcome back to EPG-Every Platform Gamer, the channel where we cover gaming news and do deep dives across PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, all of it. Hello gamers and tech enthusiasts. Today we're diving into the bombshell news that Sony's PlayStation is phasing out physical game discs, a decision stirring up debates from living rooms to boardrooms. In this deep dive, we'll break down the official announcement, explore the history of game formats from cartridges to CDs and to downloads, and take a look at how Sony's plan might create a digital monopoly on PlayStation games. Examine the industry reactions from Nintendo's strategy to fan petitions and even a conspiracy theory about stock sales, and compare it all to how PC gaming handles digital distribution. Let's jump right in. Let's start with what exactly Sony announced. On July 1st, 2026, an official PlayStation blog post by Sony's content communications director Sid Schumann quietly delivered the news. By January 2028, Sony will no longer produce physical game discs for the new PlayStation releases. After that date, all new PlayStation games will be distributed digitally only, either as downloads from the PlayStation Store or as code-in-the-box vouchers at retail, meaning a store-bought physical copy would just contain a download code with no actual disc inside. Sony framed this as a natural direction following changing consumer preferences, noting that players are overwhelmingly buying games digitally now. Indeed, Sony's own financial data shows roughly 85% of PlayStation's full game sales are already digital as of 2026. From Sony's perspective, this move streamlines their operations and aligns with how most of our community prefers to get the games today. It's also widely seen as a prelude to the PlayStation 6, Sony's unannounced next-gen console that will almost certainly launch without any disk drive. The new timeline effectively guarantees that the PS6 is an all-digital machine, because why include a disk drive if no new games will be on disc? But not everyone is celebrating this digital-only future. In fact, the decision has triggered a massive backlash from gamers, preservationists, some developers and even politicians. Before we get into why so many people are upset and what they're doing about it, let's take a quick look at how we got here. This is a story decades in the making. A little context. Video game distribution has undergone huge shifts over the years, and today's debate over digital versus physical has deep historical roots in the industry's constant push for better technology versus preserving consumer rights. In the 1980s and the early 90s, game cartridges reigned supreme. The Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis all used ROM cartridges to store the games. Cartridges were durable and had virtually no load times, which means instant access to game data, but they were expensive to manufacture and limited in storage space. Fun fact, Nintendo's Nintendo 64 in 1996 was the last major home console to stick with cartridges, which limited some game content but offered reliability and speed. Then came CDs and DVDs. In 1994, Sony's original PlayStation was a game changer. It used CD-ROMs to deliver up to 700 megabits per disc, over 100 times the capacity of a Nintendo 64 cart, at a fraction of the cost. Sony actually got into the console business because of a failed partnership with Nintendo. They had tried to make a CD add-on for the SNES, but Nintendo backed out in favor of sticking with cartridges, pushing Sony to launch the disc-based PlayStation on its own. The huge space on CDs enabled groundbreaking games like Final Fantasy VII, which famously spanned 3 discs of content, something impossible on a cartridge. Discs had their downsides. They scratched and they introduced those dreaded now loading screens due to slower read speeds. But overall, optical media allowed bigger, cheaper games and quickly became the standard by the late 90s. Later consoles moved to DVDs and Blu-ray discs for even more storage. Starting in the mid-2000s, online storefronts changed the game. PC gaming led the way. Valve's Steam platform debuted in 2003 and normalized digital downloads for PC players. On consoles, digital distribution started small via Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Store around 2005 to 2006, but by the PS4 and the Xbox One era, 2013 onward, virtually every game could be bought digitally on day one. In fact, 2020 was the tipping point when console digital game purchases finally surpassed physical sales for the first time, and the trend only accelerated. Sony even launched a disc-free free PlayStation 5 digital edition in 2020. By 2025, roughly 78% of all full game sales on PlayStation were digital, with Xbox even higher at 90% digital. That still meant about 70 million PlayStation discs were sold annually, but it shows how far we've come from the 1990s. The new norm is downloading games. It's ironic, Nintendo, the company that clung to cartridges and lost ground to Sony's disc-based PlayStation in the 90s, is still using cartridges today, and it's a hugely successful Switch and Switch 2 consoles, and maintaining a strong retail physical sales presence. Nintendo really did get the last laugh by dominating sales charts with its return to cartridge-based consoles, and now it's Sony who's planning to abandon discs altogether. So why are gamers so upset? From a gamer's perspective, the end of physical discs raises serious concerns about monopoly, power and consumer rights. Here's why so many see Sony's move as potentially bad news for the gaming community. They'll be forced to buy from the PlayStation Store. If there are no discs, the PlayStation Store becomes the only place to buy new games for PlayStation consoles. There's no more competition from retailers or used game markets to keep prices in check. No more shopping around for deals at Amazon, Walmart or GameStop. It's Sony's digital price or nothing. Critics say this closed digital marketplace hands Sony total control over pricing and the 30% cut it takes on every digital sale. A Dutch consumer advocacy group even labelled this as Sony tax, claiming it artificially inflates game prices when there's no alternative store to compete. What about saying goodbye to resale and lending? With only digital games, you can't trade used games or lend them to friends anymore. Those old school days of swapping discs or picking up cheap pre-owned games vanish. All those GameStop trade-ins or sibling hand-me-downs are gone. Many gamers rely on selling used games to afford new ones, so this could raise the real cost of gaming for those on a budget. What about ownership and preservation? Perhaps the most emotional issue. Do you own your own games if they're digital? Increasingly, it feels like you're just licensing access. Remember, on digital storefronts, games can be delisted if rights change. Then you might not be able to download them again. This isn't theoretical worry. Just recently, Sony removed 500 plus movies from users' libraries because a licensing deal had expired. Some people who paid for those films lost access, and buried in PlayStation's terms is a policy that allows account deletion after 24 months of inactivity, which would wipe out any digital purchases tied to that account. No wonder physical game collectors are distraught. They see discs and cartridges as a way to preserve gaming history and to ensure you have a copy that can't just disappear because the server shuts down. Higher prices and fewer discounts. On average, digital console games have tended to be pricier than their physical counterparts, partly because of that closed ecosystem. Sony was already sued in 2021 for allegedly inflating digital game prices by up to 175% after it restricted third-party retailers from selling PlayStation digital codes. Without discs, Sony can keep the game prices at full MSRP longer, since no used games or retail sales would be there to undercut them, while Sony counters their publishers set their own prices on the PlayStation Store. That stance is disputed. A lawsuit claims Sony's terms force publishers to relinquish pricing control on its platform. Either way, fewer purchasing options equals less pressure to offer deals. To sum it up, detractors argue Sony's plan kills competition in the marketplace by eliminating every channel except the PlayStation Store. In fact, multiple antitrust lawsuits and complaints have already been filed in several countries. In the Netherlands, a foundation representing 1.7 million consumers just expanded a £400 million lawsuit asserting that Sony's 2028 all-digital pivot will remove any meaningful competition or price for PlayStation games, cementing the 30% store commission as a de facto monopoly. And in the UK, a separate £2 billion collective action is targeting the PlayStation Store's high prices and exclusivity on similar grounds. Sony is now facing heat, not just from angry tweets, but also in courtrooms, with consumer groups warning it's heading down the same path as Apple's App Store monopoly battles, only this time for console games. Now let's take a look at how gamers and the wider industry reacted to this news, because it was loud. Fans took to social media and forced to voice their anger, using hashtags like no disc, no buy, and swamping PlayStation's accounts with critical comments and memes. In fact, Sony's main social media feeds went silent for days after the announcement, likely due to avoid barrage of negativity as posts get ratio. Over 125,000 gamers signed a petition on change.org urging Sony to reverse the decision. The petition's message encapsulates fans' frustrations. A disc is a real game you own. You can lend it, trade it, resell it, collect it, and pass it down to your kids. A box with only a download code is not the same thing. You are renting access that can be revoked. That sentiment that physical games are tied to ownership, tradition, and freedom come through loud and clear. It wasn't just fans, game developers and industry figures also chimed in. Indie devs and publishers worry they'll lose a vital avenue for visibility and revenue. Toronto-based indie creator Benjamin Rivers said his heart sunk at the news, noting not even a small physical print run can boost the game by getting it noticed on the store shelves in a way digital storefronts don't. Another example, the CEO of CI Games, working on Lords of the Fallen 2, publicly argued it's unfair for giants like Rockstar and Sony to go digital only because it makes things harder for smaller studios who still invest in physical releases. Many specialist publishers like Limited Run Games, known for boutique physical game releases, strongly condemn Sony's plan as a blow to game preservation and consumer choice. In short, they feel physical games are still crucial. Even Hideo Kojima, the legendary creator of Metal Gear Solid, weighed in at a film festival lamenting the drift to digital. Kojima mused that in a streaming era we only turn the tap as long as companies let us, and if they shut it off or if politics intervene, we lose access to content we love. Coming from someone who's always been about the cutting edge of tech, Kojima voicing fear over a no-disc future says a lot about how culturally significant physical media is to long-time gamers. And here's the twist, even some governments and competitions and competitors took jabs. In France, politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon publicly blasted Sony's decision and called for an investigation into digital media rights, declaring players have rights too. Other gaming brands and even fast food chains like KFC and Domino's Pizza piled on with social media jokes about going all digital to poke fun at Sony. You know you've upset people when even pizza joints and chicken restaurants are roasting you online. Sony, for its part, has largely stayed quiet since the announcement, no doubt hoping the uproar will die down. The company insists it is simply following the market trend, not trying to hurt anyone. Former PlayStation executives have come out defending the strategy too. One ex-SVP claims Sony isn't price gouging because publishers set their own game prices on the PlayStation Store, though not everyone finds that convincing given evidence of Sony's tight control over digital pricing. Now, if gamers are unhappy, how did investors react? Interestingly, in the days immediately after the No More Discs announcement, Sony's stock price actually bumped up 2.5% and rose about 7% over the week. Why? Wall Street appears to view an all-digital strategy as great for profits. No manufacturing costs, no cuts for retailers, and tighter control over game pricing means potentially higher margin. However, this is where things get really interesting. Just days after the announcement, a flurry of Sony's top executives sold off significant chunks of their personal stock holdings, right at a relative high point. For example, Sony's CEO Hiroki Totoki sold 225,000 shares, about 56% of his stake, on July 3rd, netting roughly $4.7 million. He wasn't alone. Sony's chief strategy officer Toshimoto Mitomo offloaded 25,000 shares, which equals about $525,000. Ravi Ahuja, CEO of Sony Pictures, sold 36,826 shares, which equals about $776,000. And John Platt, who heads Sony's music publishing, sold about 16,500 shares, which is roughly $349,000. The timing set off alarm bells among some of the fans and pundits and us at EPG alike. We all wondered, did these insiders know that this decision would spark upheaval, and did they cash out anticipating a stock drop? This speculation gave birth to a conspiracy theory that Sony's brass expected a temporary stock plunge due to the backlash and might plan to buy back shares later at a discount, effectively profiting from their own controversial decision. Now let's be clear, there's no hard evidence of such a scheme, and companies often have scheduled windows when executives can sell stock, but the coincidence of top Sony execs dumping shares right after essentially potentially announcing no more physical games is certainly feeding the rumour mill. It's a wild subplot in this saga that underscores just how high emotions are running. Investors seem split. Some are enthusiastic about the costs and savings, while others worry about alienating customers in the long run. By now, it's clear that Sony's move to digital only is a watershed moment for console gaming. The immediate winners are likely Sony's bottom line and shareholders, as digital distribution saves money and could funnel all game purchases through Sony's own store. The losers, potentially gamers and retailers, who lose choice, face higher pricing and can't own or resell games in the old way. Some even worry this might be a step toward a future of completely closed ecosystems, where platform owners decide if and when you can access content you bought. But is there another way? PC gaming has been predominantly digital for well over a decade, yet it hasn't drawn the same outcry. Why? The key differences lie in openness and consumer protection. On PC, multiple storefronts compete. You've got Steam, Epic Games Store and GOG. This means price competition and frequent discounts. Think Steam sales that help keep prices lower. In contrast, consoles like PlayStation restrict digital sales to their own platform, a classic walled garden with far less competition on price. What about the refund policies and features? Digital platforms like Steam also offer robust refund system. You can return almost any Steam game within 14 days if you've played under 2 hours. PlayStation's refund policy by comparison is notoriously strict, often disallowing refunds once you've downloaded a game at all. On PC, there are usually more consumer-friendly practices in place, which might be why PC gamers have embraced digital more readily. What about the fact that there are no paywalls for online? In most cases, another difference is that PC gamers typically don't need to pay extra fees to access online multiplayer, whereas consoles require subscriptions like PlayStation Plus for online play. This openness further lowers barriers in the PC ecosystem versus the closed subscription-heavy console model. Finally, let's not forget about the case of Grand Theft Auto 6, one of the most anticipated games in history. GTA 6 is reportedly launching in November 2026 without a true disc version. The initial physical editions will only include a digital download code in the box. This was a shock for many fans who expected to hold a disc of GTA 6 in their hand. Under pressure, Rockstar hinted that a real disc might come later. Rumors suggest a possible disc release in December 2026, a few weeks after launch, but the initial plan underscores how even the biggest game franchises are shifting to digital-first distribution. So where does this leave us? The move away from physical media is undoubtedly accelerating. It's partly driven by convenience and economics, but it's also a conscious strategy by companies to lock in customers. Sony's digital-only pivot following Microsoft's earlier attempts. Remember the Xbox One's 2013 always online fiasco? This indicates the major console makers are converging on a future where they have more control over game sales and players have less. Gamers fear that the era of being able to truly own, trade and preserve their games is ending, and they see this as a threat to the hobby they love. Will Sony backtrack? This is very unlikely. If you trust the analysts, they say this plan has been in the works for a while and Sony is probably going to ride it out. There's too much money on the table, and as Sony highlights, most consumers are buying digital anyway. But with lawsuits, political scrutiny and a PR firestorm all underway, it's clear that the path to an all-digital PlayStation is not without hurdle. Sony's decision to stop releasing games on physical disc marks the end of a gaming era. It exemplifies the tension between modern convenience and corporate profit on one side. You got consumer rights and competition and preservation on the other. The gaming industry is at a crossroads, and how this plays out will shape the future of how we buy and experience games. Let us know in the comments, are you ready to embrace a digital-only console future, or will you miss those shiny game discs and cartridges? This is EPG, every platform gamer. Like, comment and subscribe, and remember to game anywhere and everywhere.